Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Buster Show. Today we have a very special guest, Graham Bensinger. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Buster. Long time. We've been talking about this, so glad we could do it.
I know. Congrats on the new season of In Depth. Super exciting. What have you learned from season 1 till now that you would go back and tell yourself in season 1 of the show?
Probably everything takes longer than I'd like it to. You know, I've even back then wanted the show to be a huge success, a huge hit, have a massive audience, and even the show's grown a lot over, the past 10, 11 years. I think we do like 3 million TV viewers an episode, 2.5 million digital views an episode. It's still nowhere close to where I want it to be. And,
Right.
I just need to tell myself to recognize stuff doesn't happen overnight. Work hard, keep your head down, keep grinding. And that's really kind of all you can control.
That makes perfect sense. So talk to me, because we were talking right before this about how you're in St. Louis and you have a real team, like over 10 people, which is incredible. It makes sense for kind of the scale of what you're doing and the production required, because a lot of people do interviews like myself, but I'm here on Zoom. You're actually, filming with the people at the places, you're traveling for it all. Talk to me about when you realized you had to have a team to help you with everything that you wanted to do and what that took.
Well, so get a little context. So I'm 34. I started when I was in 8th grade with an internet radio show I created, and then was just lucky that a hobby and childhood passion ended up turning into a career. I left college after a year and a half. I was, freelancing for ESPN going into my freshman year of college, did that for a few years, then left because I got a good opportunity with NBC Sports and was hosting a Sirius XM radio show. But then fast forward to the last financial crisis. This is March 2009, height of it. I get laid off my NBC Sports digital video interview show that I was hosting. And I always struggled with the fact that I would do these hour-long sit-down interviews, work with a producer after the interview, but I never had control over what aired. So more often than not, what would happen is I'd conduct a hour-long interview, and 30 seconds of the most controversial stuff would make TV. And so I get laid off. I know nobody's going to give me the type of platform that I want to tell long-form stories because I don't have the resume to warrant. And so I just decide, let's see if I can figure out how to do this on my own. So I travel the country signing on an ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox station in as many cities around the U.S. as I can. I sign on the advertisers myself. I employ the people that edit and film the show. And we do everything in-house, but it was really out of necessity. And so we're in season 11 now. After the first few seasons of the show, to answer your question, I had recognized that I'd grown it as much as I could, doing almost everything on my own. We had few people, but we needed to hire a lot more people and produce more episodes. And there's just a lot of costs associated with that I had no idea. I mean, when I first started doing this, all I knew how to do was conduct a half decent interview and book a guest. And so, it got to the place where I'm like, all right, either I'm going to go all in and invest everything I can financially to try and get over this first hump, or I probably need to find a real job because it will otherwise just kind of peter out. And so end up deciding I'm going to go for it. Had no idea if it would work. End up going $400,000 in debt, almost personally bankrupt myself, but was able to ultimately get through it. And ever since then, it's slowly continued to grow.
That's amazing. And that's wild. I love that, you started in 8th grade, because I think that's, one of the big things that for anybody doing anything really, it's the earlier you get started, the better. And you dropping out of college after a year and a half, you already have 6 years experience,
Right.
instead of like somebody out of college who's just starting and they have 1 year experience at 23. You had 6 years at 20.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. To be honest, it didn't even dawn on me until I was meeting with a college counselor my senior year of high school that this hobby of mine could even be a career. When I was in high school, thought I was going to be a lawyer or wanted to be, a baseball player at the tail end of middle school.
Right.
But it didn't even dawn on me. And yeah. And so, strange how that happens.
It really is funny. Yeah, I remember the moment for me was I didn't make my JV basketball team. I didn't make it my sophomore year of high school, not my freshman year. So I was like, all right, let's call this a day.
Yeah,
Did you ever have a moment like that?
Well, I mean, the extent of my athletic ability was I played C team in 6th grade basketball.
Okay.
Actually, my 6th grade basketball coach is J.J. Watt's agent. And so that was how we booked J.J. Watt for an episode of the show. I played JV baseball freshman and sophomore year, high school water polo and cross country freshman year. But after that, I was horrible in everything. And the school, like we were required
not everything.
We were required to do 2 sports a season in school. And then I was able to kind of get out of it because of other extracurricular stuff I was
nice. Well played.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you mentioned before controversial stuff, because it's so funny. I think that's like there are multiple types of interviewers. Obviously, there are people who don't care about the relationship with the person and don't care how the other person feels, and there are those who do. And sometimes option one does do better in the short term. Sometimes, often, most of the time, all the time, they get more clicks, when they do it that way. But for somebody who wants to do it long term or make a career out of it, how much weight do you put on making sure that the other person feels good instead of going for what's controversial in that relationship?
It's a balance. It's an ongoing conversation we have internally because everything we do is predicated on access. Mm-hmm. So, we can't have a show if we're unable to make the people we want to profile comfortable in welcoming us into their homes or spending half a day or a day with us or whatever it is. And I recognize the value in having the opportunity to get that access. I also think when you get that access from a very known individual, they have an expectation, whether justified or not, that you're going to be fair to them. Fair, we always want to be. Every once in a while, though, the situation comes up where you have differing views of what fair is in terms of they say something that's highly newsworthy that should be out there if you're just basing what they said on, journalistic values.
Right.
But, the flip side of that is if you recognize that they've gone out of their way to give you tons of time, if you recognize the fact that everybody talks, and, when you're trying to book somebody, they're going to call somebody else and ask about their experience. You don't want to be in the business of people feeling like you're screwing them over. So the two come to a head on occasion, and that's challenging to navigate. But, you try and just make the best decision you can and do what you think is right in those situations.
100%. I think probably the best compliment that I can give you is that you're tremendous at interjecting at the right time, or rather, better put, listening. How much, and it's true. Like you know, how when you talk to other interviewers, or you're talking to me right now, where do you rank listening on the tier of important skills to have?
Uh, 1A or 1B.
Right.
I mean, probably 1B because first and foremost, preparation. And we put probably 100 hours of research into each interview preceding the sit down. And I think even if you like are a terrible listener and you just come very, very prepared, that's going to inherently make the person you're profiling more willing to give something that they wouldn't normally give to somebody else. But listening is obviously everything too, because you need to not be thinking about what your next question is that you have on your note card that you want to ask. Otherwise, you're going to miss something they say that could elicit a follow-up and lead to something you never otherwise would have expected. That has, without question, been a developed skill for me, one that I still admittedly feel like I have a long way to go to get to where I'd like to be. But there are a lot of people I really admired growing up and still do, who I thought were excellent at that. From Bob Costas, who I still have pretty regular communication with, to the late Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes, who I actually interviewed on my high school radio show
Wow.
back in the day. Howard Stern, Oprah, so people from like all different backgrounds, but all, I think really solid interviewers and or conversationalists.
Yeah, no, that's definitely important. You said 100 hours of prep.
Yeah.
What does that preparation look like? Is it going back and reading like their high school art, like the first stuff about them? Is it going for everything in between? Do you listen to other interviews? How do you and your team conduct that?
Yes. So it's a collective effort. It's myself, I have a couple of producers, a part-time researcher. I read and watch and listen to everything of significance on the person we're profiling. So any consequential story or interview they have ever done, I have consumed it leading into the interview or leading into the interview. And, in the days leading up to it, you're taking notes, writing questions, and then, you slowly develop the plan for questions that way. So that's kind of how I handle it. Nobody really ever told me like what I should or shouldn't do. And so that's just kind of the process for me that I found works well and gives me the confidence coming into it that I know everything I can about this person.
Yeah, no, that's definitely great. If you could change one thing about the education side of journalism, what would you change and help the futures with?
Uh, well, I would, in terms of how it would have helped me, and I don't know that that's necessarily fair for me to even speak on, since I really, went to such a limited amount of communication school. And when the school actually gets more involved, I was already gone, since that would have been later years of college. But I think a skill that could help journalists, certainly could help me and could also help people just in all professions, is selling yourself, knowing how to sell. I don't think that's a skill that's taught much in school, and one that I think is invaluable. Teaching you how to pitch and how to best present yourself. I think that would go a long way for everybody, and is probably the single skill that I think is most important to anything that I do, absent the actual interview. Because I created the business behind the show, so I'm still involved in developing sponsor relationships, involved in developing distribution relationships, involved in booking guests for the show. So pretty much everything I do is sales, absent the preparation and actual interview part of the taping. So sales is how I'd answer that.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. It all just comes back around to kind of my version of how I look at that. It's just build your personal brand. Like no matter what you do in any walk of life, the bigger and better your personal brand is perceived, the more options and the more, things you will have brought to your plate, and the more of what you want to do, you'll be able to do. And I think that, goes hand in hand with you, and also building the personal brand of, treating other people well, and just kind of how you live the day to day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just helpful to have the skill set to know how to pursue getting what you want confidently. And so I think a lot of people miss out on developing that skill, and I think it's really important.
At the very beginning, back when you were just starting to do it, how would you reach out to people to get them on your show? Because now it's a little bit different. You've obviously you have a name, you have the numbers, you have the TV, you have the digital presence, but how did you do it when you didn't have those things?
And first, again, still have a long way to go to go where I wanted to. And I mean, I have pretty much no Instagram and Twitter followers, so it's pretty humiliating. On YouTube and TV though, we have decent traction. But back in the day, I used to actually mail letters to people that I was interested in doing interviews with. And actually, when I first started in 8th grade, I went to the library, looked up home addresses for retired baseball players and Hall of Famers, and just mailed them a letter explaining the concept for this internet radio show that I was developing. And I got 4 responses. Bob Feller, Tim McCarver, Will Clark, and Ernie Banks called. And they would just call my parents' house. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone. This is 8th grade. I guess probably now every 8th grader has a cell phone, but not then. And yeah, my parents would just answer and yell back to me and say, Ernie Banks is on the phone, or, whoever it might be. I still remember Will Clark, who had just retired after guiding the Cardinals to a playoff run, and had a kind of a challenged relationship with the media during his career. He called me from the hospital. His wife had just had a baby, and he wanted to know if it'd be okay if we waited a few days on doing the interview. And I remember being on the phone with him. I was so nervous I could not even speak, because I just couldn't believe that, this guy I, at the time, idolized, was calling me. So, you do some of that, and then, that just takes you to the next thing. And eventually you're emailing and calling, and, it's kind of, now today it's a combination of all of the above with in-person meetings and so on. But it's still a challenge getting access to the people we want access to, because generally, these are A-list individuals who don't need the sort of exposure that we would bring.
Totally. And as far as your digital, do you ever shout it out on the air?
We do. Well, yeah, we shout out like YouTube on the air. So, we've tried to have each platform have its own distinct value proposition. And on TV, it's a half-hour episode weekly that profiles, one person. And then on YouTube, it's broken up by topic in clips.
Right.
There's a lot of bonus content that's unable to make it into the TV episode due to time constraints, and then so on. So it kind of, in terms of what content we put on what platform, it varies based on the platform we're programming.
All I know is if you ever did something like some kind of giveaway to build up your Instagram, you could 10x it in a day with those TV and YouTube numbers.
Yeah. All right, we'll try it. Yeah. I mean, you would know your Instagram following is killing it.
Yeah,
Yeah. How did what allowed yours to take off?
So when the kind of very brief backstory is when I was about the same age as you, but so I'm 20 now, but I was, 14, 15 in 2015. That's when Facebook was getting pretty hot on like the theme page side. So I decided to start blogging about fantasy basketball. And about that same time when I didn't make the JV basketball team, I'd moved to Connecticut, I started doing radio. So my high school, I was super lucky. Very few high schools have their own radio station. Mine did. I started broadcasting the JV girls field hockey games and just kind of learning how to do that sort of thing. And, building this fantasy basketball outlet on the side, realized that not enough people cared about it. So started covering the entirety of the NBA on a different outlet. Built that to like 30, 40,000 or whatever in sophomore year of high school when I was doing this broadcasting stuff. And then my junior year, I realized that Facebook had just launched Facebook Live, and I could take everything I was doing broadcasting, but instead of talking about the local JV girls field hockey team, I could talk about LeBron and Kobe. So I started doing that.
Right.
And all these other pages started to take notice, and they asked if I would stream on theirs. With hundreds of thousands of followers instead of, mine, which is much smaller. And they would offer to pay me like $10, $15. And I'd always say no, as long as I can self-promote myself. So I just pushed the hell out of my personal brand every single time. And eventually certain companies started taking notice, and I started hosting for the NBA shortly after, and other companies of that nature. And I launched my basketball brand, which is called Hoops Nation. So I started building that up on Facebook, and then Instagram and TikTok and all those and whatnot. But, through and through, all kind of an amalgamation of that, and just spending a lot of time focusing on the algorithmic side of digital, both personal brand and public brand side.
Okay, and that means what as it pertains to your platforms?
In terms of personal brand versus
or the algorithmic side.
Yeah, so I just knew that, at the time on Facebook, the Scher was the most powerful thing on all of social media. So I started putting out videos that people would want to share. So like feel-good videos, I knew those did super well. So I would edit up these like fan hitting half-court shot, LeBron tackling him. I remember it got like 75 million views on Facebook, like the little edit I did at 16, So I just started doing that. And I'm like, oh, this works. And then Facebook started cutting organic reach for pages that weren't paying money because they just decided. So like, okay, I got to go to Instagram now. So I went over to Instagram and realized that just consistency, giveaways, collaborating with other basketball pages, doing edits for other pages so that they could shout me out for free and I didn't have to spend any money, combined with adding in this original content that I was doing like from the radio side in high school, going to games and filming stuff that's like high school and that sort of thing. Just being on top of when are the right times for platforms. So Instagram, for example, took 3.5 years to grow 0 to 1 million on Hoops Nation. TikTok, 0 to 4 million took 5 months.
Wow.
Because I was much earlier on TikTok than I was on Instagram. Given that, I still think the value of one Instagram follower is worth about 4 to 5 times as much as one TikTok follower. Just because of how, much more advertisers, A, pay for an Instagram follower, and B, how much difference you can see on TikTok posts from one to the other, and how most views on TikTok actually come from the Explore feed, no matter how many followers you have. So I realized those sorts of things, but just paying attention and also putting like yourself, putting people in place who understand those better. So like TikTok's a much younger platform. So the kid who helps me is 16 who does that. Whereas Instagram, my buddy Aaron who helps me with that, he's 25. So that makes more sense there. So just, trying to be on top of the times that are best for platforms. But here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
For you, please post multiple times a day on LinkedIn.
Okay.
It is the hottest organic reach. and it is the most underrated platform right now. If you
Okay.
get so for example, 30 likes on LinkedIn is equivalent to 1,000 views.
Okay.
Whereas Instagram, 30 likes is equivalent to 30 views, or like 100 views or 200.
Right.
It's not even, because LinkedIn wants to grow really fast. So they're just handing out free attention. And somebody
Okay.
like yourself with, all these high profile interviews and clips and all that kind of thing would crush LinkedIn. So that,
Okay. One other question. How has your ability to monetize the platforms where you have content compared to what you would have expected?
so it really depends. One thing I've learned is obviously you have to know who's going to be advertising. So what I thought at the beginning, I was, oh, the NBA is going to advertise. And then I realized very quickly, no, the people who are going to be advertising on this sort of content are going to be artists, musicians, songs. They want their songs on the top. So then I started working with labels, and I realized, all right, how can I make this a little bit bigger? How can I run campaigns for other pages? So I started going to the labels being like, oh, I have this page and all my friends have these pages. Let me hook everybody up. So I realized that I could start doing that sort of thing. And I wouldn't have gotten it if I didn't have the Hoops Nation platform behind it.
Okay.
But being able to, make it a little bit bigger. But, in terms of like raw monetization from just the Hoops Nation platform, it's hottest during basketball season. So right now it's hot because it's the NBA playoffs. And, it's a lot. I guess the best way to put it is I thought people with 1 million followers would make a lot more on the brand side. The biggest thing, and I have a few points to make here because there's a lot to break down and package, and I think it'll also be valuable for people listening and thinking of going into this space. 1 million followers on a personal brand and 1 million followers on a brand are two very, very different things. You can charge so much more for a personal brand and so much less for a media brand. But you can run a lot more ads on the media brand than you can on the personal brand. So somebody with 1 million followers might charge $20,000 a post on a personal brand, whereas on a media brand, it might be hundreds or thousands, whatever it is, but they can run a lot more. So that was another thing that I very quickly realized. Like my personal brand, I charge a lot more for somebody to advertise, even though it's 1/8 as big as the media brand. And that was one of the biggest surprises and shocks that I learned, but it's good to know going in.
What do you think the average person with 1 million followers makes on Instagram?
It's all based on their engagement rather than their followers. So if somebody's getting 100,000 likes per post and they're all legit US based, you can see them charging 20,000 plus per post, 10,000.
And how many posts are they making over the course of a year? Or how many posts like that do you think they can get over the course of a year?
I mean, it's all just going to come down to them, their relationships. Can they create good content that performs well for advertisers? Like yourself, it's like, you could get one big interview, but if you're really talented, you're going to get a lot of big ones. So it's just a matter, it's more a matter and how like you are with your networking, because that's all of it as well. So it's really more of a relationship thing when it comes to really cashing in when you're a really big influencer.
Because the relationships for the influencers are mainly with the agency or network that represents them, as opposed to with the individual brands.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's where a lot of people are missing out, because you need people, like you realized very early on, you need people a lot less than you think you do.
Got it.
And I think that is very true in the social media and influencer world. But granted, you also, like, if you're independent, you could incentivize 4 different people. Like, yeah, if you bring me anything, like, you deserve a cut.
Yep. Right.
Instead of somebody's locked down and might not be able to. But yeah, I think, but as far as LinkedIn, I'm telling you, man, it's the one right now. I'm posting 5 to 10 times a day on LinkedIn.
Wow. And do you create all those yourself?
It's all written. So it's just, I use it like I use Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people out there who tweet 30 times a day. You know, they should just copy over anything that would be more applicable to like the business. But even then, it's broadening out. But yeah, that's what I would say there. I want to ask you though about the TV front, because that is a world I know nothing about. How does one even get a show on TV? Because you own it, and
Right.
that's very impressive. But how does that all happen, and how does syndication work? How do you make that happen?
I had no, I mean, probably similar to you. I had no idea what I was doing when I first started. I just figured I knew I wanted to have it on this platform, and how do you do it? And so I just traveled around the country meeting with individual stations in each city, because I'm not on NBC or Fox in every, like, you can't find me on NBC in every single city across the country, but you can find me on NBC in LA, Philly, Dallas, San Francisco, Miami, etc. But then I'm on Fox in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, etc. So it's syndication. So I just went city by city, meeting with each affiliate, trying to do deals, and had no idea what terms to ask for or who to meet with, and you just kind of figure it out as you go along. Ask a lot of dumb questions, and that was that. It takes a lot longer to scale when you're independent, when you don't have a network backing you or some big production company. But I think there's a lot of value in having control and owning the content. And the biggest thing to me was, when I got laid off of NBC in 2009, I had to cancel interviews with Jack Nicklaus, with Condoleezza Rice, who had just finished his, Secretary of State. And I was humiliated. And, the show was performing digitally equal to what they were expecting, but to no fault of my own, because of the change in the economy, I was out of a job. So I just told myself I'd like to avoid being in that situation again. And so I thought, if there wasn't a single entity distributing my show, but I had a bunch of different entities, and now, we have a multi-platform show. So we're on, the ABC and NBC, CBS, and Fox stations domestically. Then it re-airs on cable through, Fox Sports Nets, NBC Sports Nets. We have a handful of international TV partners. We're online through, YouTube primarily, and then, Facebook. We have a podcast we just started. We're on video screens in taxi cabs, etc. So I just told myself, if we can have a lot of different platforms, that lessens the chance for downside if one goes away. Takes a lot longer to scale, and that's the challenge. But I liked the fact that I had control largely over my own destiny then.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best. And diversifying makes the most sense, especially when you're bridging between literally multiple universes in the sense of TV and online. There's just separate, universes. And, both have tons of benefits in their own right. But yeah, that's super interesting. And I can imagine, I've honestly, and I think I'm very lucky in a sense, but I've never had the experience as to where something was like changed without it coming through me, in a sense, because everything I've done has pretty much just been small by myself. But
you don't give yourself enough credit, obviously, because you have great reach, and you figured out how to do it yourself and do it through new technology and all that. So you deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you. But we share that that emphasis, that and the value that we put on things, coming through the way that you see it, and then it actually going on air in the same way, because I can only imagine it being the most gut-wrenching feeling in the world when you do something you think is awesome and it doesn't see the light of day. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, that I recommend like doing live content, because there is no way anyone can mess that up.
Yeah, right. No, I hear you. I mean, luckily, yeah, I mean, we control what we, put on air now, but like before I did this, it was, right. I mean, I had no control over anything. So, and, how you edit and produce a piece of content makes all the difference in the world too, because you could produce it one way, it could look horrible, and you could produce it another way, and it could be emotionally gripping and go viral.
Definitely. So I want to ask you, you have a lot of fun with guests on air, but who have you had the most fun with off air? Like when there's a lot of time in between when you're shooting, you're just, hanging out, you're shooting and whatnot. Who have you had the most fun with off the cameras?
I actually, I don't have a great immediate answer that comes to mind, but I'll mention two people that were kind of a combination of on and off air. One, Mike Tyson, and this wasn't necessarily fun, but many years ago, he was our season debut episode, and his wife told me, he'll give you minimum an hour, but if it's going well, he could spend all day with you. And like 45 minutes in, I asked a question that it was about Teddy Atlas, his former trainer, holding a gun to his head when he was 15. Significant moment, but insignificant relative to everything else that's happened to him in his life, and nothing was off limits. His response to every question after that was, "I don't know," and I could just tell by the look on his face he was not happy with me. And so the interview was effectively over. Minutes later, we were asked to leave. As the crew's packing up his house, I get his guy to let me go out back and thank Mike before we leave, because Mike was behind his house with his pigeons, because he breeds pigeons. And so
one does.
Yeah, right. So that thank you turned into a 2-hour conversation, just the two of us off camera behind his house, talking about all sorts of different stuff, and allowed Mike to develop at least a little bit of trust in me. And so he then invited us back the next day. We spent like half the day with him.
Wow.
And all the difference in the world. So that was something that comes to mind in terms of how it benefited the taping. Another one that we did that was also in Vegas, most of this was on camera, but was with Dan Bilzerian, who you probably know of, like Instagram fame, apparently won, $100 million playing poker, and has, a lot of like crazy stories.
Very interesting guy.
Yeah, a couple of heart attacks and a coke and prostitute filled partying night.
Very different from you and I.
and knows, very different than me. I don't know about you. You were telling me. No, I'm kidding. But, so the taping was supposed to start at noon. Didn't end up starting till 3 because he didn't wake up till 1. And then, we sit down for a few-hour interview. Then we have a lunch afterwards. His like private chef cooked for us. Then we go out, and he has this like souped up ATV, but one that goes like 120 miles an hour. So he had us in that. We had to stop at some point because there was a 4-seater, and the audio tech in the back was like 60 and was throwing up out the side of it. And then we stopped just as like the sun setting, and he has tons of guns, and he has this like Rambo style shoot from the hip $2 bullet type machine gun. And so we start firing those things off, and then he has dynamite sticks that we throw off, and some of that like he didn't want out there, so we left a little bit of that out. And then we're like driving back now at dark, flooring it through the desert, going like 100 miles an hour, and all of a sudden he starts texting, and I'm like, first, it's dark. Second, you literally can't see anywhere you're going, and we're going 100 miles an hour. And now he's texting. And I'm like, literally like my life is flashing in front of my eyes. And I ask him, I'm like, Dan, like, come on, man. Like, let's focus. And so It was Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd was training for his final like bout of his career. And we drive off the desert dirt road onto the highway and go to then Floyd's gym to hang out with him at the gym. Only to then, when that gets finished at like 1 a.m, go back to Dan's house for a tour of his, palatial estate. And then we had like 5:30 a.m. flights back. So we literally go from there to the airport to fly home. So that was like one that, yeah. So
I would be so spooked if I was in that ATV and Dan Bilzerian was driving 100 miles an hour in the dark while texting and driving.
right. Okay. One other one. I don't know if you know who Sir Richard Branson is, but
Of course I know who Sir Richard Branson is.
Like British, billionaire entrepreneur.
Legend.
Who does also all these record-setting world adventures. Has written a couple books. His autobiography is awesome, and he like long been one of these holy grail bookings for me. And I tried many times through people, and they were like, he's never going to give you the amount of time you want. Maybe he could do 20 minutes. And so I had, when that was offered previously, I turned it down because I'm like, only one shot to do this, and if I'm going to do it, want to do it right. But the booking was going
down 20 minutes.
Yeah, turn down 20 minutes because you're only going to get one. I was only going to get one shot, and I really wanted to do the taping that I was hoping to get with him.
Got it.
And so I was in Monaco for work. This is like late October. Had a couple days to kill before going back to the States. I like hiking, so I was looking for someplace I could be active. Weather's hit or miss that time of year in Europe. North Africa is a few-hour flight from the Nice airport. So I'm like, oh, I'll fly to North Africa. Second highest mountain in Africa is there. They have good hiking. Can beat around there for a couple days. And so I was looking for a place to stay. Branson has lodges all over the world, like hotels that people can stay at. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, I could stay at his lodge there, and then I could follow up with his people afterwards saying, hey, could we revisit the request? By the way, I just, stayed at one of his hotels in this obscure region. And so first day I'm there, I'm walking back from breakfast, and there he is sprawled out on a lounge chair by himself, just screwing around on his iPad. And my heart is like pounding, I'm thinking to myself, this is my chance, like I'm never going to have another opportunity to go up and just introduce myself to somebody like that. And so I like sit down probably 20 yards away in another lounge chair, and I'm like running through my head, like, how should I introduce myself? He's going to think I'm crazy. Like, what do I say? And so I just go up and ask him about hikes nearby, and that leads to us talking for a while. He wanted to know what I was doing there by myself, and he invites me to play chess with him, asked me to play tennis with him, and then him and his personal assistant invite me to dinner and drinks that night. And then a month later, we were with him for a week in the Bahamas taping an episode of the show. So
holy cow.
So yeah, and that was one of those moments where, like, you're getting drunk with Richard Branson on a rooftop in the middle of nowhere in North Africa, an hour and a half outside of Marrakesh, high in the Atlas Mountains. It's like that was cool. So
crazy.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes to something that I've sort of always believed. And it's just like, the only way that somebody doesn't have time for you or for anybody, for the most part, is if they don't want to do it.
Right.
You made Richard want to do it. And all of a sudden, his incredibly busy schedule became very Graham friendly.
Yeah, I mean, look, to your point, everybody makes time for what they want to make time for. Right. And so, like we just, I just did a 3-hour taping with Tom Hanks. That's going to air.
So cool.
Yeah, season 11. And I managed to track down his email address like 4 years ago, and just been emailing with him every so often over the course of 4 years. And finally, he had the time to do it. And, is the nicest, most generous guy in the world. It was an awesome taping. But it's, that sort of stuff takes time. And I oftentimes have to tell myself, all right, be patient. Like, you're in you're in this for the long run, and so just calm down. And so, yeah.
Totally. And the first question I asked you is what your best advice would be, and that plays very nicely with that, and how things take longer than you think, and sometimes you had to massage these relationships to get them to a point where Tom Hanks, aka Woody, would sit
Right.
down with you for 3 hours like that.
Right.
That's the best. Who have been some of the other nicest, like, just good people that you can show love to here?
Uh, I mean, so many. We just obviously did Dak Prescott. He was great. Spent the day with him in Dallas. We before that, we did actually Tony Romo. So it was funny. NBA postponed their season March 11th.
Yep.
The week before that, we were in Serbia for 2 days with Novak Djokovic taping an episode, and we flew from Serbia to Dallas to tape Tony Romo for his first interview after he signed that record-setting CBS broadcasting contract extension. We got back from that the night of Monday, March the 9th, and then Wednesday, the 11th, everything shut down. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, everybody we profile's pretty nice. We generally have good experiences with everybody. There are some people that are, you have more fun with than others just by nature of what you're doing with them. But, we did Kelsey Grammer recently. He's this massive estate in the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York. We did Kelly Slater, best surfer ever to live. We taped him once before in Malibu. But he created this amazing surf ranch with artificial wave technology in Fresno, California. So he had us out there to, surf with him. And I can't, surf at all. So it was kind of funny. And then, just kind of, random people, but everybody's, generally, pretty nice. We did 2 days in Monaco with Prince Albert, taping one. The afternoon with Steph Curry, and so on.
That's awesome. So to close this out here, I kind of want to ask you where, obviously it's doing pretty damn well right now, but you've said a few times that it's nowhere near where you want it to be. Where do you want it to be? And I assume nobody has ever done what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, we're figuring it out as we go along. There's no person or entity that we're modeling this after. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. I think time will probably tell. I think my goal is for our content to have the widest audience possible, get the best access we can to the top people we can, and have our content regularly breaking through the clutter, getting people talking, making news. I think long term, there's the desire to open it up more. So, 1 week we have Tom Brady on, the week after that, President Obama, the week after that, Tom Hanks, the week after that, we're in some far-flung region of the world doing a human interest story. Long term, I think that's the desire on, my end. But
authentic Tonight Show.
yeah, no. I mean, I've always been aware of the fact that I don't want to do a daily show. Right. That's just not me. But if, we do 26 a year and, focus on access and quality and, so on. And yeah, that's kind of the goal. So I think we've created the foundation for something that has the potential to grow, but and it's possible we could achieve all our dreams, but have a long way to go. And, it's just a matter of grinding and hustling and figuring it out as we go.
Damn, that's great. If you could interview, I'm going to give you an interesting one here. if you could interview anybody who, either a historical figure or somebody, the qualifications are anybody who's been dead for over 100 years, who would you want to sit down?
Over 100 years.
Over 100 years. Nobody recent.
How about we go 50 years?
All right, fine. 50 years.
Okay. Hitler. I mean, how amazing would that be? You know, to have the opportunity to sit down with somebody that consequential for all the wrong reasons. Right. But I think he'd be an interesting interview.
Very interesting.
Lincoln.
Oh, that'd be a great one.
You know, think of a number, but yeah, I'd say Hitler.
Yeah, I would go, if I'm given the opportunity, I'm going way back. I mean, Jesus would be interesting. Yeah. That would be a breaking interview. Like Egyptian kings and queens. That would be very interesting. I'm trying to think who else. Like Lincoln, George Washington. Those would be very, but Hitler, right. Oh my God, that would definitely get through the clutter.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, where can people find you and season 11 best?
Sure. Well, two things. You can go to grahambensinger.com to check out TV airtimes in your region, and then youtube.com/Graham Bensinger to watch clips and all archived video from the show.
And follow the man on Instagram at Graham Bensinger. Check him out on Twitter as well, and LinkedIn coming soon. My friend, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Buster. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome. See you guys. Boom.